Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, I'm going to explain why Donald Trump should end democracy and declare himself the King of America. Let's go. Now, the theme of this video is explaining why democracy has failed and explaining other forms of government that are superior or forms of running society that are superior. It's not so much about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an example I'm using to explain my thoughts on this subject. And essentially, we've grown up in democracy and we've been programmed to believe that democracy is the best way and it's the fairest way, and the people vote and then the people decide. But it's all a lie. A great YouTuber I follow called Academic Agent done a book on it called The Populist Delusion. And it's basically the whole picture is that we are deluded as people to think that we have any kind of power or our say matters. For an example, in the UK, we've been voting for the last 50, 60 years to end mass migration, and every government who got in increased migration. So we're voting and voting and voting, but the politicians ignore our wishes. And when politicians ignore the people's wishes, you don't have a democracy, uh, because if the wishes aren't getting accepted, then, as I say, it's not a democracy. And the reason it's not a democracy is because it's turned into an oligarchy. So the financial interests control the politicians. So the politicians are not serving the people in a democracy. It's an oligarchy because the politicians are there pretending to give the image of choice, whereas really it's the bankers, it's the financial institutions who are controlling things. That's the man behind the screen, or the man behind the curtain, as the Wizard of Oz says. So the whole of democracy is a lie. We don't live in democracy. It's just a fake system designed to make people feel they have some form of power, when voting and all that is complete waste of time for the most part, because you can get people like a Donald Trump who is not part of the system as such. Now, don't get me wrong, he's still somewhat part of the whole system, but he's not part of the current establishment. And that's why when you hear a lot of these politicians and the media, who are all part of the establishment say, they say Donald Trump is a threat to our democracy. And if you understand that democracy doesn't mean the people, democracy means the powers that be. Because as I say, the politicians, they're not representing the people in a democracy, they're representing the financial and the oligarchy. So Donald Trump is, when they say Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, they really mean Donald Trump is a threat to our current financial and political elite. And from there, you'll say, well, what is the alternative to democracy? And in more traditional societies, they had what I think are two superior forms of running society. And they are monarchy, which is a king, and ideally a sacred king, and also an aristocracy. So the monarchy would be a sacred king who would be the father of the nation, and he would run things himself. Everything he says goes. And he would have, this is not this idea of the king being the greedy one who uses the people and gets all the money. No, the king, as I said, would be the father of the nation, and he would be responsible. So if things went wrong and the people weren't happy, the people would, as happened in the past, they would remove him. Sometimes they'd use the guillotine to remove the king if they let the people down. And that's the alternative. If the king becomes corrupt, then the people will revolt and they'll remove the king. Whereas in our democracy at the moment, our system is so many tentacles to it, it's hard to remove it. And people have this delusion, oh, if we get rid of Keir Starmer, things will get better. But it's far, far bigger than just one prime minister. It's, as I say, a deep state filled with so many tentacles. You'd have to go in and drain the swamp. But the swamp is so filled with bankers, with the civil service, with the education system, with the pharmaceutical, with the military industrial complex. With all these things, it's virtually impossible to remove it. Whereas if you had a monarchy, it's easy. You just take the king out. And as I say, the second best version would be an aristocracy. And that would be the most wise, intelligent people in the society, say a group of 5 to 10, a council of elders, who would make the decisions. and they would be working for the spiritual health of the nation, not for money. So they wouldn't be allowed any financial interest or anything like that. They'd be the wise heads who are looking out for the best interests of the country. Rather than what happens now, we have corrupt financial elites and politicians who are working to enrich themselves and their own system and abusing the people rather than serving the people. And that's why when you look at the America situation at the moment, America would be far better positioned if Donald Trump just declared himself the king of America. And I say that because you look at Donald Trump's first term. Donald Trump, I believe, has lots of good ideas, just as some politicians in the UK have. But the problem is you have to go through the Senate, you have to go through the MPs, and you have to get it voted for. And then all of these people will push back against your plans. Like if Donald Trump wanted to, if he was a king, he could have just built the wall and had it done. But I had to go through this and I have to vote. And then the Democrats will try and push back and block all the things. So every time you try and do good, all of the institutions in place keep pushing back. And then you have to go to the Supreme Court, but then the judges are corrupt. So it's hard to get things done in a democracy in the way our current system is. As I say, if Donald Trump just declared himself king and said, build the wall, then it could be done. Like if I was in the UK and I was declared king, it'd be brilliant because I would just go, right, shut the border, stop the boats coming in, deport all illegal immigration, sack all the civil service, get rid of all the DEI, stop sending all our money to foreign countries for wars and all that nonsense. Get rid of the net zero scam that's costing us billions and billions and billions. Ban Islam from the country. Reform the Church of England into something like the Christ of England. So instead of churches being places where you boringly read a Bible and is soulless, churches would be places of fellowship where I would institute leaders of Christ who are connected to Christ, who can build that spirit in the country and the community. I would reform the financial system, get rid of the fiat or put the fiat back on a gold/Bitcoin standard so that we'd have a fair financial system that's not inflated, where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer as time goes on. I would destroy liberalism and bring back traditional values, family values. I'd support family values. And all these things would be done for the spiritual health of the nation. And that would be done as a monarchy, as a king, or as a group of individuals coming up with these ideas to help the country. And we wouldn't have all the government and all these problems blocking us. It could just be done. And then if time goes on and people are not happy, the people can remove the king or the aristocracy. And I believe in sacred kings, if you had a sacred king, then that in traditional time it would go to the son. But I think a better way would be sort of how the church does it in the Pope. You'd have the sacred king, and they would appoint their deputy. So then, if they die, it would go to the deputy, and then the king would choose the next king who they believe is suitable. Okay, so that's the point of my video today. It's really just to get people thinking about we're living in democracy. People haven't considered other options. They don't realize that democracy is a delusion. It's a populist delusion. For us as people going out voting, thinking it makes much difference, we are a bit deluded to believe that. That doesn't mean that we can't have better governments. Obviously, it's better to have more conservative governments than these crazy liberal governments, but the still a million miles away from where we need to be. Even Donald Trump is a million miles away from how system and government could be run, or how a noble leader, truly noble, wise leader would behave. Donald Trump, as I commend him for stuff he does in the short term, but he has no long term goals. As I say, if he was thinking of the future, he would be reforming the financial system. He would be ending the military industrial complex, the big pharmaceutical companies. He'd be ending that. But because he's in our current system, he has to make the most of the 4 years to keep the votes and keep the party in power. Whereas if he's a king, he can look long term because he doesn't have to worry about winning the next vote, and he can just do what's right. And the reason why so many politicians kick the can down the road on the financial situation and we keep getting in more debt, more debt, more debt, is because it's not going to win any votes if he says the economy is going to be messed up for the next 10 years. People don't want to hear that. They want to hear, oh no, I'm going to sort the economy out, even though it's a complete lie. So yeah, as I say, that's the point of my video today, to get people thinking. And we need to move away from democracy and think of other ideas and other systems. Okay. Comment below if you have any comments, like the video if you like it, subscribe if you're new, and God bless everyone. Goodbye.